Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hacking with Friends. Today we have my new co-host James on, as Michael has now been missing from the cryptozoology conference for 2 weeks, but don't worry, we've seen lots of credit card activity from outside the country, so I'm sure he's fine. James, thanks for being on today.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, so we are going to be continuing today our series on hacker operating systems. There are so many out there that the debate is really intense for kind of which one is the best hacking operating system in general, or for beginners, or for advanced users. And the one we're going to be covering today has one of maybe the most vocal user bases of any of the hacker operating sections. James, what are we covering today?
BlackArch Linux.
BlackArch Linux. So if you know anybody who runs BlackArch Linux, you probably already know this because they love to bring it up. It's a point of pride because BlackArch Linux, like Arch Linux, is seen as a branch of Linux that is for maybe more advanced users or people that are comfortable or familiar with Linux or Arch Linux in general. So this is maybe not as user-friendly as something like Ubuntu or something else that's for absolute beginners. But the trade-off here is that it comes with an absolutely massive amount of tools. The other trade-off here is that it is not Debian-based. So, James, can you explain a little bit about like why commands in Ubuntu or Kali or Debian will all pretty much kind of work the same?
I mean, they're all Linux, so they're all kind of similar, but the package managers inside of Debian-based operating systems will often be like apt, and then or aptitude, I think is what the full name is, and then inside of Arch-based operating systems like BlackArch Linux or Manjaro will be Pacman and the Arch user repository. So
Right, so some of the skills that people as a beginner in Linux might have picked up working on a Debian-based operating system, they may not really transfer over. A lot of the stuff will work, but some of the other things like updating packages, installing things will work differently. And this can be a little bit of a learning curve for people that, have just messed around with Kali a little bit. They've never touched Arch Linux, and they just don't understand, what the package manager is doing or any of the other kind of low-level basic stuff they need to just get started. Because like everybody knows, when you get a new operating system, okay, you update it and you make sure that it's fully upgraded. Cool. Well, if the basic commands to do that have totally changed from the last operating system you've used over to this one, then yeah, you can expect there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for getting started with Arch Linux. So that being said, this is not hard to install. In fact, it's much easier to install than Arch Linux, which our previous guest who was coming on to teach everyone how to install it actually gave up because it was so annoying to install Arch bare metal onto a computer. And he just said that it had changed so much from the last time he'd used it that it just didn't even make sense to him anymore. And it wasn't straightforward enough to recommend, which was a pretty harsh critique of the Arch Linux install process. But I mean, I was there with him. I agree it was kind of confusing. So today we're going to take a look at some ways you can install BlackArch, which again seems to be pretty straightforward. The instructions are very well documented, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a computer scientist really even to install this stuff and use it. So James, how are we going to be installing BlackArch today? Because I know it's able to be installed in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, so if I pull up the downloads page, if you want to look at my screen for a minute, so on there's ISOs that you would put onto a bootable media. You have a full one, so that'll have, I think, all the packages in the ISO, or a net install one, which will grab a lot of stuff from the internet when you're installing or after you install.
So this is either like a one-time sunk cost in downloading a giant file or a very small light file that will then pull all the required packages from the internet as soon as you can get a connection.
Yeah, exactly. You also have an OVA image, so if you want to use like VirtualBox or something, you can just download this and import it straight in. Or if you already have Arch Linux installed, you can make a couple of modifications and just basically turn it into BlackArch pretty much. You can get all the tools from the BlackArch repository. So
these are three pretty easy ways of doing it then. You're not really tied to one specific way of doing this. You can do it from a super, super small ISO image You can do it from a massive OVA file, which can be virtualized really easily in VirtualBox or like Parallels or some, which is a paid solution, but it tends to work a lot easier than VirtualBox sometimes. And you can also just take an existing Arch installation and just weaponize it effectively by adding a bunch of offensive and defensive tools.
Yeah. And I mean, the reason, just to go over briefly, why people say installing Arch Linux is difficult, it's usually because you actually have to do some manual partitioning, which can be confusing, but the install process in here is very much sort of step-by-step, run these commands, create these partitions of these types, of these sizes, and then you're good to go. So it's pretty simple to install BlackArch. I would say it's easier to install than it is to install normal Arch Linux because the documentation's a bit clearer.
That's great. And what are the advantages of having this over running Kali Linux? Because again, this is easier to install than Arch, but it's still not as simple to install as some versions of Kali Linux that have been just made as dead simple as possible because so many people are using it.
So I think you mentioned earlier that there are more tools in the BlackArch repository. There's over 2,600. So there's a lot of tools in here. As its Arch derivative, it runs on a rolling release system. So it's constantly updating in all aspects of the OS. And that's not something that Debian shares in terms of features. And Arch tends to be, I mean, you could put a clunky desktop environment on top of it, but at least in BlackArch's case, it's a pretty lightweight system, so it would probably run a bit better on an older system compared to Kali.
So I would compare this in my head more to like Parrot Security OS's selection of tools more than Kali. I find it's actually a bit harder to get your tool included in Kali Linux than it is to get it included in something like Parrot Security OS. That team just seems to accept a lot more tools, and I see a lot more like bleeding edge tools that are being constantly updated in Parrot Security OS. I notice there are a lot of old tools in BlackArch Linux, but there's also a lot of new stuff as well. So just the sheer volume of tools that are included is something that makes BlackArch stand out among other operating systems. James, have you ever tried to get the Hunator included in like Parrot or Kali or anything like that?
We looked into getting it included in package managers, and in the end we just got it on like the snap development thing, and that was like, we're like, that's good enough because it was a pain. You can actually just stick anything in the Arch user repository though, so that was really easy. But
interesting.
Other than that,
cool. Let's see. Okay, so now that we've gone over some of the benefits of this, when we're talking about an OVA file, first, could you blow up your screen a little bit so we can read it a little better? I forgot to mention that.
It was already blown up. How much more blown up do you want?
More. There. Yeah, good. Now I can read everything. So when it comes to an OVA file, what is the benefit versus installing from an ISO file? Because you can install either one via VirtualBox.
Yeah, so I won't actually import it because it's already set up. But if you were in VirtualBox and you just went kind of file, import appliance, and then you selected the OVA file here, it would take a long time. So this is already the one I have in there. I won't do it again because it takes a long time because it's a 29 gigabyte file. But you just do that and you boot up, and assuming VirtualBox is happy, it will just run and you're good to go pretty much. You don't have to fiddle around with partitioning or anything.
Yeah, one thing I really like about OVA files is, okay, yes, they are massive, but as soon as you put them into VirtualBox, it's like a pre-frozen virtual machine with all the settings and switches dialed in the way that it should be. So you can usually just put it into VirtualBox, run it, and then after, admittedly kind of a long time to get it started up, it should just run. Like you'll be in the operating system basically ready to get started, as opposed to having to install the operating system into VirtualBox from the ISO file, which is, it's not that difficult, but it doesn't have all the settings already locked in, and you'll need to set some things up in order for them to work. Cool. So how do you want to show it off? You said you want to show off the install from an ISO first on a, well, I'll let you.
Yeah, so we'll start off by going through an ISO, and then once we've done most of that, we'll go into this, because at a certain point it gets to a thing that'll take a really long time. But so we're going to go through an ISO install so that if you were installing it on bare metal, you would know what's going on, basically. So Yeah, that's the idea.
Cool. Let's do it.
Right. So we're in VirtualBox right now. Before we start this, I want to just talk about a couple of things in VirtualBox that I had to do today. Um, I didn't have to do this for any of my previous virtual machines, but today everything decided that it was just not going to play ball. So first of all, I already had this done, but you need to have AMDV or whatever your virtualization equivalent is enabled in BIOS. You need to go and disable Windows virtualization platform, which is a really weird thing. That's what caught me out. I think when you install WSL, it enables that, and you have to disable it to actually get it working. And also I had to update VirtualBox for whatever reason. That was probably just because I had an old version. But
so that's like 3 separate things that people running a PC may need to do in order to make this possible. So it's also 3 things where if it's not working, you should check each one and make sure that, you know, you're not caught behind that. Because the BIOS thing, I have no idea about that until I tried to teach a class. I was like, oh, I'll just have them run a virtual machine. It'll be easy. And then I had everyone's laptops, some of which were like school issued, that we had to go into the BIOS of and enable virtualization. So I don't know why this is disabled by default. It's kind of annoying when you're trying to teach people this, especially if they've never been in their BIOS before, because it's kind of scary being in BIOS if you've never been there before, because you're just afraid of messing anything up.
Yeah, but I mean, like the other, so that one it gives you a fairly like standard error for, but the other thing I was talking about where you need to disable the Windows virtualization platform, whatever that means, is it was giving me like a completely unrelated error. I would just like be booting up the machine. It would be like kernel panic, and I'm like, why? And I couldn't get the logs out of VirtualBox. I sat there confused for like a couple hours before I finally figured out what was going on. But anyway, so if
That's good. Thank you for your service, because I hate using VirtualBox so much that I use Parallels because they gave it to me for free. But every time I mention it, I also say it should be free for students, and it's a critical mistake that it isn't. So I don't really endorse Parallels, but I do mention that it's an easier experience than VirtualBox sometimes because it gives more clear errors. And at least if you're using a Mac OS system, like it allows you to just pop one of these up without any of the problems that we've been mentioning. That being said, VirtualBox is free and free is good, and I appreciate the fact that there is a free virtualization platform like it. It's just a real pain sometimes that I've spent several other hours furious trying to figure out problems like James is describing. So teaching VirtualBox is often a difficult process, but it is worth it learning how to use it.
Yeah, and VirtualBox should run on like any platform, I think. So it's a pretty consistent thing. So if we press new to create a virtual machine, and we're going to select Linux, and then this is Arch Linux, and it's 64-bit, so we're going to select that. I'm going to call it BlackArch 1 very creatively. And I'm going to give it...
James, is there any way you can zoom in on your screen at all? I imagine probably not when you're there. It's just kind of hard to see. Yeah.
First, like the default Windows. No.
Wait, make Windows think that you're old. Go into the accessibility settings and just jack the font up on everything. We've had to do this one time before. I just want to see if it's possible, because it would be good. These settings, if you mess them up, are like a way that you can really mess up your virtual machine. No dice?
I'm trying. Hold on. Ah!
Yes!
Ah!
That's perfect. Okay. It looks so good. That looks so good. Thank you.
It is huge. I'm kind of scared. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this later. Anyway, so...
no, this is beautiful. It's really easy to see. Thank you.
You're welcome. So we have 4 gigabytes of memory selected, and I'm just going to leave this part default. So
that's 8 gigabytes, or
no, we select that in a second. That's not big enough for BlackArch. But create a virtual disk and VirtualBox disk image, dynamically allocated, and so I am going to give this a maximum.
Can you wait? You're speeding through super fast. So dynamically allocated. Can you explain what that means? Because a lot of people haven't partitioned a hard drive this way before, or like set up a virtual machine this way, so they don't understand what the advantage is between the two.
So dynamically allocated just means it's going to be a bit slower for you to access, but it's not actually going to just swipe that much space away from your computer. It's going to take up more as the actual virtual machine uses it, is my understanding. So you only use space where you need it.
Exactly. Yeah. So just this is an option that can like really have ramifications if you don't have a lot of disk space. If you set up a virtual machine, with like 64 gigabytes of space and it's not dynamically allocated, you are setting aside 64 gigabytes of space on your hard drive for the virtual machine. If you do select dynamic allocation, then the partition will grow up to 64 gigabytes if needed, but it will basically take up the minimum amount of space it needs at any given time. That is obviously preferable, even though it's a bit slower. So just make sure this is like an option that I've run into a couple times where I try to make like a virtual machine, I forget to do that, and then I run out of space and I can't even partition it because there's not enough room. So just a little choke point that beginners might get stuck on.
Yeah, that's good. Good explanation. And the only thing is that you need more than the default amount of space it's going to try and give you here, because again, BlackArch has a ton of tools. So yes, you need like 64 gigabytes probably. I think it's what I did last time and that worked. So we'll stick with that. They have 128 in the OVA file, but this worked. So I'm just going to do that. And then we're going to go
128, that's a lot.
Yeah, so we're going to go into settings now, and we're going to change things up a bit more. What I'm going to do is go into system, processor, and just give it another core, because I like to do that with
what
machines.
If you started a virtual machine and it needed more cores, what would the symptoms be? Like, what would this fix?
If everything is really choppy, then you probably don't have enough processing power, but this should make pretty much everything smoother, I think, is my understanding.
Why not jack it up all the way to the end of the green zone, huh?
Well, fine. If you want 8
fly into the danger zone. Yeah. Okay, cool. Perfect. BlackArch is such a light system. There's no reason to do that. I'm just saying, like, anywhere in the green zone will make it faster, but anything above the green zone will make your overall computer slower.
Yeah. This thing could run on like a potato pretty much. It's pretty lightweight. So the next thing I'm going to do is go back into settings, because I forgot to do this, and go to the storage tab. We're going to click on the empty thing in the controller, and this is like adding a disk basically. So this is like if you were plugging in your USB drive or adding a disk or something, and you choose a disk, you find your ISO, and you can use the net install or the full version. It shouldn't be that much different. I'm just going to use the full version here, because that way we don't have to sit around and wait for things to download.
Yeah, don't you, if you forget to do the step, don't you get like a nice like disk install medium not found or something when you try to start it?
Yeah, you'll just get like nothing. So you'll realize where you went wrong pretty quickly.
Yeah, so for anybody who's doing virtual machine for the virtual box for the first time, we're basically in this case, it's like we're adding a virtual disk drive and then putting like the CD of like BlackArch in it. Is like that's the virtual version of what we're doing. So we're adding like a virtual drive and then putting the disk image in it. And if we didn't do that, there would be nothing to install and the whole thing wouldn't work, because we've just designed a system, but we haven't given it an operating system until this step right here.
Yeah. So then I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to start it by, you can either press the start button or just double click it. And hopefully this will work. So it's going to ask us to select the startup disk, which there's only one option, so it's not a very hard choice if you selected the thing a second ago. And here you actually have some graphical stuff, which is not normal for Arch. And hello, zooming is doing things.
That's beautiful.
I don't know what's going on.
Did you lose it? Did Arch break out? Has it escaped into your room?
I may need to turn off the zooming, Kody.
Yeah, well, once we have Arch open, it's probably fine, because it'll scale appropriately. I mean...
Yeah, I need to turn it off. Sorry.
But bless your zooming. Wait, what if you full screen it? Full screen Arch, see what happens. I dare you.
Oh.
Okay, it just exists in the exact center.
Yeah, so it's starting now, even though I didn't select it. It selected the thing at the top of the menu. I'm not sure what you can see. My screen is like moving around.
I can see great.
It's taking up most of my 4 monitors right now.
Really? We actually see it. We see it very small, or not very small, but like moderately small in the center of just a big white.
Yeah, this is taking up my whole like center screen right now. So the default information, I'm gonna have to pull up the guide in a second, but I think the default user is root and the password is BlackArch. Yes. Okay. So
Wow, that
those
was
are the
fast. I guess it's those
yeah,
8 cores, huh?
yes. But this is not like installed right now. We're basically running in like a live USB environment. So if you installed it and plugged it in, it's not actually going to be saving anything to the hard drive right now. So what we need to do now is I need to go out of the Zoom so I can actually use my other screens, because otherwise I'm going to do bad things and mess up. Okay. So if I pull up the very well documented install guide
Yeah, in
that you
VirtualBox also
follow
you
with,
you might just need to increase the screen zoom factor like to 200 so we can see it
yeah,
as you
I'll
install.
do that for you. But if you were installing this yourself, you would go onto their website, and there's a guide section. So you go there and you can install it for yourself. So if we ignore that, and how do I zoom in?
It should be under like screen or zoom factor scaling.
Scaled mode.
Oh, I don't know if that's it. Maybe. Yeah, try it. Yeah,
Oh,
cool.
that is
Yeah.
nasty. That is nasty. Okay, so, oh man, so this actually scaled nicely last time. So you're in luck because now it's just blowing everything up. But
Yeah, it looks really good
yes.
actually.
So so following the install guide, we just go into a terminal by. Sorry, I kind of skipped over that. You right click on the desktop, and this is actually how you access everything in BlackArch, from what I can see. So you go into terminals and you can select different colors. We can be the green one,
Of
and I guess
course.
the text is green
Yeah, it's
because
required.
hacker stuff. And as the guide specifies, we're just going to type BlackArch install -install, and it's going to ask what we want to do. So if we were not using the full version, we can install from the internet. But as we've done this to save time, because we're just loading up our disk rather than downloading stuff, we're going to select option 2 here to install everything from the ISO.
Cool.
And to make things a bit less messy here, we'll do 1. If you were having issues or expecting to have issues, I guess you would select 2 there.
Yeah, that just gives you more information to paste into Google if you're running into an error, so you can figure out what the hell is going wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So, and if you're, I know from experience, the default is the EN-US locale. So if you're not EN-US, look through the list by pressing 2 and then set it. But we can just hit 1 and then enter the default. And again, same thing with the key map. The default key map is the US keyboard key map. But if you don't have that keyboard layout, then look through the
Can you press
list of
2
available.
just to show them?
There's a lot.
Yeah, wow, there is a lot.
So yeah, take your pick. I'm sure you can install other ones too if you wanted to.
Okay.
So if we then hit enter, it went through as if we pressed 1 because we looked through the list. And as host name, I'm just going to call it BlackArch 1. I don't really know how to explain what a host name is, to be honest.
A host name is how it shows up on the network. So if you wanted to confuse someone, you should name this MacBook Pro, which is what I like to do on all of my like Linux systems.
Amazing. Okay, so I mean it's close enough. It's Unix, right? So we're gonna just hit enter there. We only have 1 disk here. If you were installing this on bare metal and you had more disks, you would have like SDA, SDB, SDC, I think is the way it would work. So we're just going to do SDA. You cannot, in a virtual machine, you should not at least be able to mess up your actual other stuff. So it's going to be like, are you sure you want to overwrite this stuff? You shouldn't be able to overwrite your actual media. So that's something to keep in mind. But if you're installing on bare metal, you can absolutely overwrite your other operating systems. So
and that's where you would want to be careful and dual boot on this option.
Yeah, if you were dual booting. So here it's asking if we're installing it with Windows, which we are not. So we're going to press N.
Or any other operating system. If you had another Linux system, I believe that if you didn't select that, it would just roll over it and it would still exist, but there wouldn't be like an option to boot to it. So it wouldn't install like a grub bootloader.
Yeah, okay. So again, we're going to have to press yes here because we're going to partition our thing, which is the fun part. But again, the guide is very good here. So again, start with an in-memory zeroed partition table. that sounds like the normal thing to me. I'm pretty sure that's what they do in the guide. I'll just verify that really quickly so I don't mess anything up. Have to skip over some stuff. There are some extra things that come up if you do the net install, but it should all be fairly self-explanatory, and it is in the guide. So they don't say anything about it. I pressed yes last time, so I'm going to press yes this time. Even though I don't completely understand what's going on. These are your different partitioning methods. GPT, I think, is the newer one, I think, and DOS, I think, is the older one that, for whatever reason, they say in their guide to use DOS. So you could, if you know what you're doing in partitioning, go with GPT. I don't know what I'm doing. So, I'm not denying that, so I'm going to go with DOS. And now we're in the partitioning program that I think, I forgot the name of, CFDisk, CHDisk, something like that. So first of all, we're going to create the boot partition. So this holds, like, I don't know enough to explain this properly, to be honest with you, but it's the kind of information that directs your boot, if that makes sense. EFI file, maybe, sort of, that kind of thing, where that stuff is put. So if we press new, and this does not need to be the full size, this needs to be like, how much do they give to this? 500 megabytes. So we're just going to type 500 M here, and a primary, and then we need to mark this as bootable. So I'm using the arrow keys here, and I'm on the SDA1 partition, so I'm going to select bootable.
Okay, so now you've set up a partition that should direct the computer to boot the other partition you're about to create.
Yeah, I'm going to create two more partitions. I'm going to create a swap partition and then the primary partition that all the stuff actually goes onto.
Okay.
So after that, we are going to go down to free space by hitting the down arrow, and we're going to create another one that is going to be, how big do they make it? 512 megabytes. And the swap, this is the swap partition. So the swap partition is where, if my memory is correct, where you put the, if you run out of RAM, basically, you have too much stuff open, it'll put the extra stuff into the swap file, which I'm pretty sure is what this is for. I could be saying something completely wrong, which would be very embarrassing, but hopefully not. So if we do that, and then what we need to do here is actually change the type to Linux swap / Solaris to tell the operating system that this is our swap partition. And lastly, we're going to create the last one, which is just going to be our remaining space, which it will autofill for you. So 63 gigabytes. And that's a primary one, and we leave that default. So after that, we need to make sure we go and we hit write so that we actually write our changes. So we have to type yes. And then after that, we can quit out of the thing because we've written our changes.
Kind of alarming how little confirmation you got that like that was all done, but still.
Yeah, good. This is not like, again, if you're not like kind of used to this, I mean, if you don't want to learn it, just use something like Kali. If you do want to learn it, what I did the first time I installed Arch is I ran through this on a virtual machine the first time to get the hang of what was going on, so I didn't remove or delete like half of my actual system, because that would have been really annoying. But yeah, so we're going to quit out of there, and it's going to continue along the install process. And Kody, do we want to encrypt our root?
We probably do. I mean, if we're using a security like focused OS, then it makes sense to make sure that it's locked down as best as possible. Although there is always the possibility that you lose, all your stuff.
Kody has a very mixed opinion on disk encryption, but yeah, so this is going to use look to encrypt our disk. If we type yes, so we'll do that. And our boot partition here is /dev/SDA, which is the drive, and then 1, which is the index of the partition. So that's our boot partition, the first one we made. And this is ext4, which is the file system type we're using, which is pretty common on Linux. I think most, if not all, Linux distributions use ext4. I think Windows probably uses something different, but so, and then for our root partition, we are going to do /dev/sda3. So that's the one with the most space that all our actual stuff is going to go onto.
Is that the primary partition where you'll be basically running the operating system from?
Yeah, and again, this is ext4. Swap partition, dev sda2. The one that we created, that was the different type for the swap partition. So we specify that, and here it gives you a little confirmation thing, and you can say no. Presumably it would let you go back and change anything, or just probably tell you to redo it, but it's correct. Looks fine to me. So press yes, and then it's going to say formatting partitions. Are you sure? No crying afterwards.
The gatekeeping on this operating system bleeds all the way through the operating manual into the actual installation code itself.
It keeps going.
Are you brave enough?
Funny.
Are you brave enough to press yes? Your tears are your fault past this point. Thanks, BlackArch. Yeah, let's do it.
So we want our passphrase, so I'm just going to do BlackArch because I'm feeling creative. And then you do the confirmation where it doesn't show you what you're typing. Either time, actually, but yeah. And then it's going to do some things, and then it's going to tell us to enter the password we just gave to it.
And this is where it's going to be doing the encryption for the hard drive, right?
I think so. So it's what's it doing? Dumping data from live ISO, grab a copy and pop shells. So I think this is where it's actually doing most of the yeah, it's very elite operating system, isn't it? More than Kali, if I remember. But the people that made this clearly think that they're big hacker men, or hopefully they're just doing that wrong. But anyway, I'm allowed to throw shade on Arch users because I use Arch BTW. But
oh, I was wondering how long it would take you to mention it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is the part where it takes a very long time, and after this it's fairly self-explanatory. Yeah, so it says this can take a while, and it took like half an hour last time. So rather than sit through this, I think we should hop over to the OVA version now, if that works.
Yeah, that works. Cool. So after this runs through all of the hard drive encryption stuff, then we're left with an operating system that's more or less set up, and you can just follow the last couple steps.
Yeah, and again, the documentation is pretty good, so just take a look through that if there's anything that we accidentally glossed over here.
Yeah, so now if you're lazy and have a fast internet connection, this is another route you could use to just get started without pretty much anything James just showed you.
Exactly. So we get a nice kind of leet grub boot area, and I'm going
very
to...
small for us.
Yeah, I'm going to blow it up in a second. Hold on.
Cool.
View, scaled mode, yeah, whatever, and then there we go. So
beautiful.
Again, I think the default credentials are root and
BlackArch.
Yeah. So
you're in. That's it. That was the whole process of doing it. So
BlackArch.
Yeah, so if you wanted to install BlackArch in like 5 seconds, then here you go. Or if you want to do it via the ISO file, then you can do that too. But obviously, this is a massive file to download and have just on your computer. So just keep that in mind.
I mean, not only that, it takes like 10 minutes to import after you have it downloaded. So it's a chonker, but it's definitely, if you're just using it in a virtual machine, it's definitely easier. So I would probably say just do that unless you're practicing to actually install this on your physical hardware. So what do you want to look at? We can open a terminal.
So in a terminal window then, for people that are coming in from Debian, how would we update and upgrade this operating system?
So,
or install packages for that matter.
I actually tried this earlier, and it didn't work. So we're gonna see what happens. But we're already root, so usually we need to use sudo here, but we're logged into the root account, which isn't what you would actually do if you're using this. You would create a user account and go through that, but that's probably a little out of the scope of what we're doing right now. So
It only takes a second if you wanted to make a lower privilege user account, if you remember
yeah,
how to do
but
that.
then we have to give sudo to it, and I don't actually remember.
Yeah,
how to do it
yeah,
off the top
okay.
of my head.
All right, sorry.
If you were, so the package manager that Arch uses is called Pacman. So if we wanted to just update everything, which you do quite commonly in Arch because a lot of stuff updates all the time because it's a rolling release operating system, is you do pacman -SYU. And this will, I think the capital S is for sync. So if you were installing a package, you would do just capital S and then package name. But if you want to just update everything, SYU will, I think, just run through everything. And it gave me an error, but it downloaded some things and it's going through some things. What I'm going to get right here is it's going to tell me that there's a conflict between two of the pre-installed packages, which I do not have enough experience with BlackArch to resolve myself. So
Yeah,
normally,
so immediately, like, you can get just like an error that's like kind of difficult to understand and fix. So just realize that, people coming from Cali, like, you're going to run into some errors that you just don't understand or you haven't seen before, and you'll have to fight them. But it's more or less the same process as running into an error any other Linux operating system. You copy and paste the output, you find someone who fixed it, and then you learn a little bit more about how Linux worked through just figuring out why it wasn't working. Fun.
Yep. So I don't know what Python Gast is. So unless you really want to try and fix that, we can take a look.
No, we can. Yeah, we can look at some other stuff. That's fine. So how can we see the tools that are installed? Like, what's the default view of being able to go through these?
Yeah, so again, you access everything by just right-clicking the desktop. So we have our browsers here. It sets you up with Firefox and Chromium, so open source Chrome, basically.
Hmm.
And there's a couple of network tools. So Wi-Fi radar, don't know what Wi-Fi radar is, and Wi-Fi radar poll kit. Don't know what that is either.
Yeah, I don't. I'm literally Googling it because I haven't seen it. Oh wow, it's just like it's in a huge list of.
Yeah, they have a whole list on their website of like all the tools that come in pre-installed, and it'll link you to the GitHub or whatever for the particular package. But there are a ton.
Yeah, So Wi-Fi Radar also looks like it's just like a scanner that just like tells you all the smartphones or computers around you. So it's just like listing in on packets and telling you traffic around you. Kind of interesting, but it's weird that it gets its own pedestal because I've never heard of it myself.
Yeah, I don't know. So and there are other network tools like in the BlackArch section too. So I don't really know why that gets put on such a pedestal. So if we go to the BlackArch tab, there is a ton. These are categories, Kody.
Wow.
These are all the different categories you have. Which one do you want to look through?
Can you just hover over drone?
Hover over which one?
Drone. It's right under DOS. Skyjack. Okay, so that's by Sammy Kamkar. It's the tool that allows you to take over drones and basically steer them remotely. That's very fun.
So if we click that, I think it'll give us a little information about.
Well, it basically runs it with no arguments, so you can see all the different stuff in a fresh terminal window. That's cool.
Sorry, the screen's a bit small, so every time I hover over something with too many things in it, it just expands over the whole screen.
But is there an OSINT section?
Sorry?
Is there an OSINT section? I'm just looking through the list. No, not really.
There's a lot of OSINT stuff, but I don't think it was under a particular section.
What's under wireless? I'm curious. It's the last one, yeah. Whoa! Basically everything. Air crack NG, air decap NG.
So sorry, what I just did there is I'm scrolling between virtual desktops, which is another thing that's pretty common among Arch desktop environments, I think, or what I use anyway. I use i3 as my desktop environment, so I have those, and they're implemented here too. They're on a couple of other operating systems as well, and I keep doing that. Okay, hello. So wireless, you said I can't get to it. It's
There's just too many options to show on the screen. All right. What about? Oh wow. Okay, so eSite NG. There's just a ton of stuff. There's Wireshark. Can you pop up in Wireshark?
Where is Wireshark?
It's. I assume it's in here. Maybe you can just
Yeah,
open internet terminal. Just
in here.
yeah, just type Wireshark in that terminal. Yeah, it has it. Okay, cool.
It's huge. Hello. Okay, so slight issues with blowing up a screen, because in reality the screen is like 360p and it's blown up so that you guys can see what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the best way to do it is there's an option to just scale it in the virtual machine options, but I don't remember the exact sequence of like settings you have to go into to do it. But you can set the scale so it's not dynamic, and it just like increases it by like 200% or 150% or whatever actually like looks good.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I don't see how to do that immediately. So, we're just gonna sweep that under the rug because I can't actually close it super easily. What else do you want to look
at? I'm kind of interested to see what is available under honeypots. It's the last option on the left side on this one. Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot. Artillery, Bee Swarm, Blue Spot. Okay, that looks interesting. Thinked, Wi-Fi Honey. Click on Wi-Fi Honey. Sorry, I've heard of that tool. I've almost covered it before. I just want to see what the arguments are. Wow, okay, so just ESSCD channel and then interface, and you can potentially pop up a like a Wi-Fi access point that's like acting as a honeypot. Cool. All right. Well, it seems like there's just like an absolute ton of these.
Yeah, sorry, I saw a section NFC.
It doesn't have MFOC. That's kind of disappointing to me. Can you just type
what?
Can you type in a terminal window? Can you type MFOC? Oh no, it does. It does have MFOC. Okay, so it has basically everything I can think of. Like, can you try AirGeddon?
How do you spell that?
AIRGEDDON. I love it. Okay, yeah. So as you can see, some of the things that are not included in Kali, but I consider to be some really, really great tools, are pre-installed. So, just by clicking through this, James could get, James, go ahead, press enter. I just want to see how easy it is to get set up, because right now, I don't think you have access to a virtual, like a card, but go ahead and press Y. Wow, that was really easy. So as you can see, like we originally didn't have the correct like stuff installed to run this tool, but the tool is able in BlackArch Linux to just install the tools that needed itself, or install the dependencies it needed itself, and then just without even closing itself, was able to get ready to do bad Wi-Fi stuff. So right now the problem is, James, do you have a wireless network adapter that is compatible? Yeah. So if you wanted to do the next step, then you would need to like plug in a compatible wireless network adapter and connect it to your virtual machine. But I mean, this looks like all the tools you would want to attack Wi-Fi are already pre-installed in BlackArch Linux, and all you need to do at this point is just point it towards the network adapter that is capable of doing this attack, and then select which attack you want to do. So yeah, this has a lot of bleeding edge tools that are able to update themselves, and that since they're already pre-installed, even if you don't know a lot about installing or maintaining BlackArch tools, or as James is running into, you're getting some sort of error, it's really not that difficult to get started with this and be able to try out these tools that are pre-installed.
Yeah, so like as you said with the errors, a side effect of Arch being on a rolling release sort of system is that you're basically beta testing everything for the rest of the Linux community. So sometimes you'll get some errors, then you're probably not the first person to get them, but you may have to like scour the Arch Linux forums or something. So yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah. So is there anything else you want to show off with Arch Linux? Or BlackArch Linux?
Not in particular. There's a couple of interesting tools. There's obviously the standard ones like burp and walk and hash cat, of course. We can try to run ones that may actually just work. So there was one called AutoVPN, which I had never heard of and I couldn't find the GitHub for, but supposedly it will just get you a VPN to wherever you want.
What?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is going to work. I haven't tried it. But, okay, so it keeps
Try
failing,
another
which is
VPN?
kind of sad.
Failed. So is it just? I mean, I'll have to look up how this is working. It's just trying like random VPNs. That's weird.
I don't know what it's doing. I don't know if it's like their free VPNs, but or whatever, but I couldn't find the GitHub. The link was a 404, and there's a project by the same name now that like looked pretty cool. Like it automatically will set you up a Amazon AWS server that runs a VPN. But the other one was Wi-Fi monitor, which I'm not even on Wi-Fi, so we'll see if this works. But I think this is like an ARP scanning tool.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so this is probably router Mac not found. And this is usually just because of the way that the networking is working in a virtual machine. Like you might not run into these problems if you were installing this on bare metal, because you would be able to interface with the wireless card of your computer, and you would be able to see directly the MAC address of like the router, because you wouldn't be going through like a virtualized interface.
And one thing that might fix this is if you went into the network tab on the settings of the machine and changed the network adapter settings. Maybe you could fix that, but I don't want to fiddle with that right this second. There's another one called What Breach, which I think was a thing for checking if your passwords were breached. So I'm not going to run this on my email because I think
sorry, I just realized auto VPN will never work because it is what you were talking about. It creates an on-demand disposable open VPN endpoint on AWS, but if you don't create a file that has the AWS credentials in it, it will never work.
Okay. So it was just a different link. There we
go.
So that's why it's not working. It's a pretty cool idea. So here's whatbreach.py. So you could check an email to scan for breaches. Do you have an old email that wouldn't have anything you care about connecting to it?
Yeah. Try Zuck ZUCK at facebook.com.
So if we do what breach -e, what was that again?
Zuck ZUCK at facebook.com.
Okay. So
You've
what's
got
happening
a
here?
Python error.
This is a fun BlackArch thing. So what's happening is it's running it with the wrong version of Python. It's trying to run this with Python 3, and this is a Python 2 tool.
So you have to put like Python 2.4 or something?
I'll see if I can briefly. If we did that, that's Python 3. So by default, it's Python 3, which is unusual. But if we did Python 2 user bin what breach -e socketfacebook.com.
Invalid syntax. Python 2 is no longer supported, James. I thought you didn't. I would have assumed you would know that.
Yeah, but apparently, so there's a lot of tools in here that I just picked out some random ones from that I didn't have time to actually run through. But so apparently some things don't work in the repository, which is a massive shocker. But what I suspect is that if you actually found the Python file and you ran it with Python 2, this tool would work.
Yeah,
probably fine.
I would say, like, one thing to keep in mind in this is when you have over 2,000 tools, it means that there's a slightly lower level of quality control when it comes to, like, are these tools actively maintained every month? Like, if they're broken, are they removed? The answer is no. Like, they're not removed if they're broken. If people stop maintaining their tools and they get old, then, like, eventually they'll stop working. So there is a bit of a, warning label that comes with being on a rolling distribution with tools that, they're going to be there, but they may or may not work. You could get really frustrated and think that it's something wrong on your computer that you did, and then just go and find out that no, it's actually just this tool has been updated in 4 years and it's still included, just like any other tool that was updated yesterday. So it's really hard to know when stuff has been, maybe just not maintained, or if it's your particular instance that's causing a problem. And that can be really frustrating for new users who have a hard time tracking down errors and stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, if we were actually trying to do something, we'd be going about this completely the wrong way, because we're coming at it from like a solution looking for a problem rather than a problem looking for a solution. So we're bound to find things that aren't going to work.
Yeah.
But it's like the situation where this would be helpful is if you were Googling a tool for a specific kind of thing we were trying to do, there's a good chance it would already actually be on BlackArch, it seems like.
So some other tools I use all the time. Can you see if ipcalc is there? All one word?
Yeah, it looks to be.
Cool. And then what about routersploit?
Like that?
Yep. That one's not installed. So do you know how to install a tool? Because I imagine routersploit. No, it should all be one word.
Is it? Hold on. Let me see what Arch repository it's in. It's in the Arch user repository. We need to use a different one. But no, it's in the official repo. So if we do, it's one word, sorry. So if we do pacman -S routersploit, then we can just go ahead. It'll ask if we want to proceed with the installation after telling us how big everything's going to be. So we can press yes. I'll download it from, this is on the official Arch repository, so you can download this on any Arch operating system, I'm pretty sure. And now we should have it. No. I think they're lying to me.
The computer said that it downloaded it.
Yeah, I think you're giving me a fake command.
Upgrading routersploit. Oh, try typing rsf.py. No, rsf.py.
Well, it won't be rsf.py because we're not like in the directory, but it'll be in the path as rsf. So no module named routersploit. Interesting.
So it installed it, but then it's impossible to find. All right, well, fun. So we've covered a couple of the hang-ups you might encounter when working with BlackArch for the first time, and some of that includes mysterious installations that go to nowhere, and also being unable to update and upgrade from the official OVA image when just loading it through VirtualBox. This obviously can be discouraging for someone who has been working with an operating system that, I don't know, makes sense when something goes wrong. So for people that are using Arch or BlackArch for the first time, there's definitely a learning curve when it comes to figuring out why this shiny new OVA you downloaded directly from the website just isn't working at all. James, are you lost? Are you?
I'm a cat.
I know what this is. Every time I think you're distracted, I just realize you've recruited us a new co-host. So how does Thomas feel about the installation of BlackArch? Does he feel like it was excessively complicated and that the errors were confusing, or does he feel like this is something that beginners could sink their claws into?
Sink their claws into. Very entertaining. So, I'm not sure how he feels. He seems to be happy enough, so maybe he's an Arch user, BTW. But yeah, what I would probably say for the general person is this is easier to use than actual Arch, but at the same time, I personally would hold the opinion that installing a bunch of tools like this seems like a weird thing to do, in my opinion. But if you wanted to do something like this, where you want a bunch of stuff pre-installed, this is probably a pretty good introduction to Arch after you work your way around the initial few issues, which you could figure out with some Googling. So yeah, if you want to get into Arch, maybe this is an interesting way to start getting used to things and learning about it. But
so personally, I got into using Arch-based systems by using Manger and then adding weaponized Manger packages. This actually creates a beautiful user experience because you get all the benefits of Arch Linux with an absolutely gorgeous user experience. But as you start adding stuff from other repositories, it starts slowly causing conflicts, which cause the operating system to rip itself apart over the course of 6 to 8 months. So while it's really great to use and operate for that 6 to 8 months, after a while it gets very sad as it starts to slowly be unable to update or upgrade and starts to have all sorts of issues with conflicts between packages and things like that. So I recommend checking out Manger if you're also looking for an Arch-based operating system. If you're looking to load all the weaponry from BlackArch into it, you can do it, but it causes a fatal condition to the operating system that runs its course over 8 months. So just keep that in mind. You can also feel free to just install them one by one, but a lot of them aren't in the official Mangero repository, which means either manual installations, which sometimes come with its own problems, or sometimes kind of a clunky like updating process when you start installing some more exotic or out there tools. But again, I really do like the user experience in Mangero. It's much more targeted towards beginners that are shifting over to Arch Linux. And I think it's a good place to get started if you find BlackArch or Arch a little bit frustrating.
Arch is pretty much, or no, Manjaro, sorry, is pretty much every man's Arch. It's graphical install almost completely, I think.
Yeah.
If not completely. So yeah, definitely if you want to get into Arch and you don't care too much about having thousands of hacker tools pre-installed for you, then yeah, that's probably an easier thing to do.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for going through all the installation steps, running it via an ISO, installing via an OVA file, which is huge, but goes a little bit smoother sometimes, and also showing us how to basically select tools and install them if they're not there using BlackArch Linux. I'm sure a lot of people are getting ready to feel very smug in their local hacker community.
Wow. You're making a lot of us I feel personally attacked.
Well, yeah. So anyway, I think that this probably rounds out our hacker operating system series, unless you guys can think of some more. I know there's a lot more out there. So if you want to see some more, feel free to shout them out and we'll try to do some more like this because it's great covering some operating systems you might not have tried out. I was actually thinking maybe Mangero. We could do an episode on Mangero if people are interested in that, since we've talked it up so much in this episode. So let us know what you think if you want to see some other operating systems. Hopefully we'll have James back soon to show us some more. Or if there's some other topics James wants to show off, maybe we'll have them to show off some security stuff too, or maybe Rust. I know that you're into Rust too.
Yeah, I am a Rust developer.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you to everyone who was with us on the stream today in the comments. Also, make sure to check out the Varonis brand channel to see Killian's new show, which is Threat Update, right? Yeah, Threat Update, which is basically learning about the way that big companies are dealing with cyber attacks and what they're doing to protect themselves. You can check out that as well as hackingwithfriends.com to see when we are going live and be alerted when we're doing any exciting new stuff. Hopefully we'll see you there, and we'll see you next time. Bye.